House Republicans wasting no time in their new majority. The Judiciary Committee firing off a number of subpoenas targeting the Biden administration last Friday, demanding documents surrounding its response to threats against school officials during the pandemic. Let's bring in Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, chair of the House Judiciary Committee. He's also a member of a newly formed subcommittee that seeks to investigate alleged weaponization of the federal government. I guess one party's view of weaponization is one thing, the other is something entirely different. Are all these things what the American people want or expect you to do at this point, Congressman?
I mean, we talked about certainly during the campaign. I mean, when you have two standards of justice, which is what I think we now have in our Justice Department, and you have Americans who I think with common sense see that, they expect their government to serve the people, not target them. And we know that that's been the latter's been the case because of the number of whistleblowers who've come talk to us. We've now had over 24 whistleblowers come talk to us, FBI agents who come to us and say, look, this is what's going on. This is how political the Justice Department has become. So that's why we have that select committee. But then, of course, in the full committee, we got a host of issues we want to deal with. First and foremost is the border that is no longer a border. That was our first hearing last week, and we'll continue to focus on that issue and have legislation that we bring forward.
I think it's like anything else. I think you can get 50% of the country said, you know what, I want to know whether there was influence peddling in the Hunter Biden case, for example. You're going to pursue that. The other half says there's nothing here. There's no there. Any of these things you're talking about, the balloon. I saw half the country say we don't care about the balloon. The other half is like, this is the worst security breach that we've ever seen. It's so divided. I guess you have to look into your own soul and decide what is important. You can't be just with the whims of public opinion. You can't go that way.
Yeah, but I do think there's an attack on the First Amendment. And if you look at what Elon Musk exposed with the release of the Twitter files, I do think you saw government putting pressure and working with big tech to keep information from the American people. And of course, the biggest example is the Hunter Biden laptop story, where you had 51 former Intel officials write the letter October 19th of 2020, where they said the Hunter Biden story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. Nonsense. It wasn't. It was the truth. But they said it, and that became the norm. And then you had the FBI meeting weekly with folks out in Silicon Valley, and they squelched that story. They kept that story from circulating and the American people seeing it just days before the most important election we have, which is election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to work that way. You're supposed to be, freedom of speech, the First Amendment is supposed to be protected, not have the government pressure big tech to keep that information from the American people.
And yet the antitrust individual that we have doesn't seem totally committed to maybe holding big tech to the fire. At least that's the perception.
No, we're committed to holding their feet to the fire and stopping them from censoring conservatives.
I'm talking about, he's certainly not going to break them up, not worried about monopoly power, or not worried about any of the things that the last Justice Department was worried about.
Well, if you look at the piece done on the Thomas Massey, who we've put as the chairman of that subcommittee, the piece in Breitbart where he said no monopoly is safe. I think that's Thomas is focused where I think Republicans are and most Americans are, is we don't want monopoly power out there. And all too often it's the regulations that are in place. It's a whole host of things that are in place that allow that. So we're going to look at all that. But specifically on big tech, we want to make sure if they're going to censor someone, they got to tell you. And we're going to look at Section 230, and there's got to be some kind of transparency when they do it. There's got to be some kind of accountability if they're going to continue to go after conservatives, which we know they did over the last couple of years.